The European Central Bank finances heist of America's favorite $16 billion jewel. Hello and welcome to today's Daily Blitz. An era of central bank warfare has begun. Now, while previously central banks have colluded together in order to set the same policy rates and do roughly the same actions around the world, it now appears that they've begun to finance takeovers of foreign companies. Isn't that right, Nikolai?
Yeah, it's a completely bizarre idea if you think about it, but it's already happened. The European Central Bank has been buying corporate bonds in Europe as part of its QE program. The thing is, some of those bonds were used to buy a foreign company. In this case, it was French fashion conglomerate LVMH purchasing the American jewelry company Tiffany Co.
Right, that was a $16 billion takeover, and a significant amount of that money was raised by issuing bonds, which the European Central Bank have almost certainly bought.
And if you think about that, it is a completely bizarre situation. It means Europe is printing money in order to buy an American company. And that's a form of financial warfare in any other sort of context. And it's just a shocking idea that if other central bankers sort of pursue the same sort of policy, then at some point we're going to be in a period of financial warfare where countries are printing money to buy each other's assets.
It adds another level of absurdity to the fact that LVMH's bonds were issued at negative yields to some investors. So some investors were paying LVMH for the privilege of lending to them in order for them to finance this massive buyout of Tiffany's and Company. To put on top of the fact that LVMH was effectively given freshly printed money in order to finance this foreign buyout just makes the whole thing look even more absurd. But we may need to get used to this as simply the new normal. The central banks subsidize their own companies to buy out other foreign companies, similar to the classical mercantilist school of thought that was rife during the time of the British Empire.
But it's not just any companies that are involved here. It's companies that sort of thrive on the idea of inequality and the inequality boom that's captured a lot of political imaginations around the world. The owner of the French company that bought Tiffany Co. is in fact France's richest man, which means the ECB is printing money to help France's richest man to buy an American company. So it really could not look any worse for the ECB in terms of the unintended consequences of their policies.
But are indeed they unintended? And will they continue to be unintended consequences in the future? Will all the other central banks in the world, will all the other politicians in the world allow the European Central Bank to subsidize their own European companies to buy out others? Or will they, in fact, start getting in on the game? Will the Bank of Japan, will the Bank of England, for that matter, will the Federal Reserve all start subsidizing their own national companies to start buying out and seizing other countries' companies in a form of corporate raiders gone legitimate, almost like pirates becoming privateers during the golden era of piracy?
That's right. You can see politicians who are going to appeal to this idea that something unfair is happening when a foreign central bank is printing money to finance the acquisition of a strategic asset. Now, Tiffany Co. is obviously not a strategic asset, but there is the suggestion that the Americans might sort of return fire in this case by buying certain European companies.
Now, this definitely seems like something that Donald Trump would be a big supporter of. But in recent weeks, we have seen some noise from the White House about whether or not the US and, well, really, the US Treasury should take a controlling stake in a company like Nokia, which of course isn't a US company, it's a Finnish company, to help them win the Cold War trade war with China over 5G, to ensure that the US has its own 5G technology that is only for use within the US and its allies, and is not contaminated, as it were, with something that could be subverted by the Chinese Communist Party. So there are rumblings of this happening already. That issue of taking a controlling stake was not something that would be directly subsidized by the Fed. It would be only by the government. But effectively, in the future, the government could issue bonds, which would then be purchased by the Fed in order to finance the purchase here, which is very similar to what happened with LVMH and Tiffany's in the first place.
So as we see things, this could be the opening salvo of a war between central bankers financing foreign acquisitions.
But that sums up today's Daily Blitz. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell down below, and we'll see you in the next one.